How soon after being widely published did Hollywood take an interest?
When it hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was in about 2 months, I think it was March or April of '94, and it hit the New York Times bestseller list, and then suddenly it became a property. So we started hearing from every every producer in town, really. I mean, we had a list of hundreds who, because that's the way it works. You know, they want to pick up the book if they can, and then parlay it into something with a studio. But what we did was eventually, after this, we did get an agent, and we went to the heads of all the studios to talk about what kind of deal might be made.
What was your primary concern when negotiating any possible movie deal?
Well, you know, it's a spiritual book. It has a devoted fan base because it seems true to the authentic spirituality. And so we obviously thought that we had to protect the movie. The movie had to have carry the heart of the book. And so that was our stipulation going in. We needed to be involved in the selection of the writing of the screenplay, the selection of the director, and those kinds of things.
How receptive were the people, the movie moguls, to that?
Well, but essentially they just tried to buy it. You know, we would say, well, here are the controls that we need, and they would say something like, well, we understand. Here's some more money. and I would say, well, look, you got to hear this. This is what's important for me with this book if we're going to make it into a movie. And they would say, well, you're a great negotiator. Here's some more money. So we finally just stopped that process.
Really? So the book at that point was not acquired by any production house at any time, optioned or otherwise?
No.
Cut to 10 years later, and now the movie is going to be released in the spring. How did you get from there, where you were protecting your precious little baby, your sacred child,
right, for
so long, and suddenly you decide yes? What prompted that decision?
You know, I was involved in writing a sequel to the Celestine Prophecy, a couple of study guides. It was a pretty busy time until about 98, 99. I actually hired a screenwriter, and that didn't work out. So I just really felt ultimately I would need to write the screenplay. So I'd never written a screenplay, so I then had to do all the due diligence and try to figure out what that craft was all about. And it was about '01 before it was actually, I had written a drafted screenplay.
What was the biggest challenge transitioning from straight narrative, novels, nonfiction books, to the haiku of screenplay?
Well, you know, it was the obvious challenge, brevity. You know, the long form is so much easier. You know, screenplay writing, in my view, is the poetics of this general art field because it's so dense, and it's so you know, the words are so valuable, and the taking a viewer through that kind of drama in an hour and a half or 2 hours, you know, it's the hardest form in my view.
Now, assessing what material is going to remain in the screenplay, one of the biggest challenges for an adaptation, of course,
Yes.
from a novel is most of it goes. There's only 3 things that can stay. How did you go about picking what's to pitch and what's to keep?
Well, you know, the book is very, very verbal. It's very, very philosophical. It's very, very didactic between characters. Almost all that had to go. What the heart of the book, though, and the heart of the movie, we hope, is this journey of this one person coming from a point where they're the life is it feels as though it's stopped, or they're at a crossroads, and they begin to awaken to a different view on reality, in which the spiritual dimension starts to creep in. And so that was primary, that it was a journey of awakening, all from the beginning of the movie to the end.
Now the hope is that in every level of the process of adapting a book, particularly one that has a tremendous following, a devoted following, and probably know it forward. They're like Tolkien nuts, you know. The hope is that in the evolution of a transition from print to screen, that at every level, going from the novelist to the screenwriter, into the director's hands, and finally editors, that you're going to elevate the material each step of the way,
right,
versus strip it,
right,
and undermine the intent of the writer.
Exactly.
As you moved from the novel to the screenplay, do you feel that you elevated the material or merely mirrored the material?
Well, that's a good question. I do think we elevated it. The book has a parable effect, which means you can read it and you see an adventure tale, or you can read it and you see something below the adventure tale, and you can wait another year and read it again, and there's more that you can pick up, because the insights are, I believe, archetypal steps that we're hardwired for. So you get, you can read all 9 insights, and it gets downloaded at a certain level, and you can read them again, and it'll change depending on the circumstances of one's life. Now, I don't take credit for doing that. Most of the crafting of the book to have that effect was a download, a kind of intuitive feel for how the material should be put together that I wasn't completely aware of. I consider it a kind of higher self or spiritual download of some angel whispering in my ear, whatever you want to call it. It was something that I received and sort of got into writing, but I don't take credit for that. But that's the effect that people talk about when they have an experience, a long-term experience with the book. So the idea was to try to have the movie have that kind of an effect. And I think that because we stayed true intuitively to the process, I believe all the way through, I think it has that dimension. So, in our testing, we've seen that people immediately want to see it again, immediately report, after seeing it again, report that they see links and connections they didn't see the first time. And people who've seen it 4 or 5 times report that there's something new to discover in it every time. So again, we weren't completely conscious of that process, but what we did try to do was, from the beginning, and again, it was our investors and our money and a whole lot of talent that didn't come from us to get the movie made, but we did have producers that were very collaborative. We had a director who was immensely collaborative, maybe his strongest talent. So out of that, I think we have a movie, that is true to the book at those several levels.